We want to welcome everyone to today's webinar on the topic of navigating influencers and social media, digital discipleship, and discernment. I'm Danny Kwan, Rooted Senior Director of Youth Ministry Content and Cross-Cultural Initiatives. Thank you so much for taking time with us today. Um, some of you know Rooted's mission is to equip and empower churches and parents to faithfully disciple students to lifelong faith in Jesus Christ. And today we're really focusing on one of our pillars of ministry, relational discipleship, and how digital discipleship and social media and influencers can influence our discipleship and how we can really um, work to influence them in with the gospel. And so I love for us in our live webinar today, again, if you're joining us, to type in the chat box your name, your church, and your city. And also, um, if you have any questions during the webinar, please type in any questions and we'll try to get to them during or at the end of the webinar. But I really love this topic of navigating influencers and social media. Um, um, we are all big fans of K-pop Demon Hunter, I know. And I'm going to introduce our webinar host, and he's going to introduce our two panelists. One of our panelists, our third panelist, was sick today, so she couldn't make it. But we have the two most talkative panelists here. So, Clark, I'm going to introduce Clark, Dr. Clark Phobes, Doctor of Missiology, lives in San Francisco, longtime um, servant of Rooted and serves in San Francisco, missiologist, really smart, bright man. Actually, all three of them are smart. Justin has a doctorate in like five doctorates, and Kevin is a Hollywood producer of a TV show called Armosaurus, rhymes with dinosaurs, but I'll let Clark introduce them. So, Clark, take it away. I'm going to be here and interrupt as usual.
Sounds good. Thanks, Danny. Well, I think Danny took all the introductions, so I don't know much
No,
more to
no, go
say.
on. Go ahead, go ahead.
Um, but welcome, everyone. It's good to be here for this webinar. Yeah, we have been doing these webinars, a lot of times focused for us on Asian American youth ministry, but today, the more broader topic on social media, influencers, and just that whole world of things. So hopefully there'll be a good conversation. Dorothy's not here to rein us in, so we apologize if it feels too much like just bros hanging out at times. So, but we'll try our best to honor Dorothy also in her absence. So my name is Clark, and I'm the associate pastor at First Baptist Church in San Francisco, a multi-ethnic church in the heart of the city. It's 176 years old. It's the oldest Protestant church in California. Um, and yeah, I get to be joined by my two friends, really, Justin and Kevin. You guys want to just introduce yourselves really quick?
Yeah, I'll go first. Justin from Houston, Texas, student ministry for a good bit, and I'm just in a season of learning and freelancing.
Free
Um,
agent, if
Free
anyone's looking.
agency, yeah, free agency. But yeah, I'm just honored to be here. Love talking about this one. Looking forward to learning from both of you guys as well. And so I'll throw it to producer Kevin.
All right, so yeah, Kevin did student ministry for 20 plus years in the LA area. And yeah, really glad to be here with you guys. And I was bivocational for most of my ministry career. And so currently I'm full-time working on a Disney XD and Disney Plus TV show called Armosaurus. So yes.
Get that paper. All right.
You mean the
Well,
degrees behind Justin?
Oh
Yeah.
man.
Yeah, it's real paper.
yeah, doesn't pay though.
That's
Let's
not.
be real. So let's go to this topic of social media before we get off the rails. I'm here in San Francisco, the tech capital of the world. Um, once formerly the social media capital of the world. Now, since a lot of the social media companies have left, now it's kind of becoming the AI boom. But this is a topic, even for me in San Francisco, I always feel uh, just horribly under prepared for and uneducated in because it's constantly changing. It's a world that I just don't live in that much. I'm on Instagram and that's it. Um, but as we think about social media, maybe we can talk just first of all, how should we think about engaging with students in social media? I think the typical verbiage that's come out or messaging has been that social media is bad. You think about Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation, and he's just basically just saying like, don't give social media to your kids to at least 16, if ever. Um, but on the other hand, if we think about proper modes of contextualization, entering into the world of the people we're trying to reach, teens today are digital natives. They're living in the world of social media. So as we think about engaging teens in social media, what are some maybe we probably need to think about boundaries too, but also just how do we think about that? Like, is it all bad? Should we go full in? I mean, how do we just navigate this as those trying to reach Gen Z and Gen A?
And can I interject? There was one good question related to this. It says, is it okay for me to use social media to promote the gospel, but not allow my kids, teenagers, I'm assuming, to not allow them to use it? So just kind of framing that Clark's kind of opening question. Sorry. Yeah.
I mean, there's, like you said, there's a lot of things we need to talk through. I mean, a lot of layers. I think I'll just go straight into the youth ministry understanding of it, and what got me kind of thinking through this topic. I think we were using social media as the primary way of communication to a lot of the students, but then what we didn't realize, we didn't really take in consideration the parents' understanding, right? So the parents were trying to gatekeep for especially their sixth grader,
Yeah.
seventh grader, eighth grader, but then all of our communication was through social media. And so
Mhm.
then we started to have this kind of unnecessary divide. Those who were in the know were on social media, they were always engaged. But then those who felt left out were younger. And so there's a lot of practical things. For me, that's kind of where my thought process began. Kevin, what about you? Like, were you the same way or?
I yeah, totally agree. I think when we started, okay, so I've been in youth ministry long enough to have done youth ministry before social media was a thing, right? Like,
Mail outs, and
and so when we realized basically that the best way to contact students was through social media in terms of announcements and those kinds of things, it was like, great, this is a tool that we're going to use to let all the students know what's going on in ministry. But you're right, it started to create a have and have nots divide with parents, particularly. So we actually switched over a couple years ago. We switched over most of our announcement communications to parents in a very specific way. And then with students, we actually used it as a ministry opportunity and handed the accounts over to the students actually and used that as a teaching tool more so and a servant tool more so than like this is how our ministry is going to let people know what's going on. And so we actually did that as a way to kind of read volunteers and use it as a leadership tool, use it as a way to teach students how to understand and utilize social media. So that's sort of the switch that we made. Yeah, Clark, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I was never in a youth ministry that really used social media because I don't know, maybe I was old school. I thought using mail when I moved to MailChimp, I thought that was like a huge leaps and bounds. I was like, oh, this is an amazing innovation.
I
And
thought you were going to say mail and then stop your sentence. I was like,
no, no,
wait,
no, no, no,
licking
I used to
stamps.
what
do
are stamps?
I used to do mass BCC emails. And then I was like, oh, there's new email newsletter services like MailChimp. And pretty much since then, I've only used that. I have kids in my youth ministry today that like don't even know what Instagram is. We actually have a good amount of even high schoolers that still are not on social media because their
Mm,
parents, like you guys said, were gatekeeping. And then when they finally give them the freedom, they're like, I've gone without it. What do I need? Like, I don't want it.
yeah.
Um, so it's just been interesting for me to see that now versus even like, I don't know, 8 to 10 years ago, the engagement of social media is different now too. Um, Yeah, so I've not really had that problem as much. And maybe it's because I'm in San Francisco. Everyone's parents are in tech, so they're just like, over that. It's not that, grand and shiny new thing because they've had it for so long. So it's just not something I've dealt with as much.
But Clark, you bring up a good point. I think you have evolution of social media platforms, but then just as schools continue to require computers and laptops, and now they're kind of reverse trending with not allowing cell phones in the classrooms. I think
Hmm.
you have to take time into consideration, right? Just the platform of Be Real and TikTok, really short formats versus Instagram, Facebook. Back then was Zynga or GeoCities and stuff like that, right? So long format to very short format to even bite-sized formats. And so when you ask the question of social media, when is the appropriateness? I think it's you have to really consider when, how do you think through it, and then just kind of the discipleship process in it as well.
Yeah, it actually goes back to answering the initial question that was asked in the chat about I'm using it, but I don't allow my kids to use it. I think when we talk about social media, we have to differentiate with our students in terms of consumption versus production, right? So there are definitely people that are like, to be perfectly honest, like ultra influencer celebrities, they're not actually scrolling and getting their content on social media any longer because at that point it's a business, right? So they're just creating content, they're putting it out there, and then they're kind of done. But most of our students in ministry, most of our kids that are picking up social media for the first time, they're not doing it to create content, they're doing it to consume content. And I think it's a big differentiation. And before any of our students and even our kids, and this is something we have to teach parents, before you give them a phone, before you talk about whether or not they should be on social media. We have to talk about what actually social media
Yeah.
is, right? Like the actual act of sitting there and receiving content in this short form. It's very different even from watching YouTube videos. It's very different from watching TV shows. It does something to your attention span. It does something to your ability to understand what people are for. Like when you're just constantly swiping because something is boring. Again,
Yeah.
it I think it dehumanizes to some degree, right? So without having those kinds of conversations, I think we're not doing our kids any favors by not differentiating between the difference between producing content and consuming content.
I think you got to say that again. I think the consuming, creating is a huge divide because I think when we were studying this statistically, everyone was like, screens are bad. It's harmful.
Yeah.
And I think it was geared more towards the consumption aspect. And it wasn't just social
Hmm.
media, it was video games, it was watching TV even, movies, and then now with Netflix and YouTube, it was screens are just this one monolith of, like consumption, which there's a lot of stuff there. But I think that is a conversation you need to have in your household of how do you do both of those wisely, and then what are the effects? I don't know if a lot of households are having that, and I would say I bet you a lot of youth ministries aren't even thinking about that either.
Mm.
Yeah. That kind of brings up, I think, a follow-up question that conversation network of youth pastors here in my city of San Francisco we were just having recently, actually surrounding a lot of the political chaos that happened over mainly Charlie Kirk, but just everything that's been going on politically, and how that's all happening on social media now.
Right.
I forget where I read this, but this has been said a lot. I think that most people's political formation now is not happening through newspapers or political like TV. It's social media. Most people get their news through social media now. And so social media has obviously become a force of discipleship and formation. So when we think about that idea of creating versus consuming, um, how much do you guys think we as youth ministers, youth ministries should engage in that? Because I think on the one hand, there is a good call of warning that we should not fully dive in and we still need to be formed. Like the medium is the formation, right? And so we need to have mediums that form us that are in community and embodied and so on and so forth. But I also wonder sometimes if we reject the medium of social media completely, are we just not dealing with this area of formation that students are going to get formed in regardless?
Right.
So how can we kind of think about that? I don't know if we necessarily should all become influencers, but uh, we do need to have those conversations, like I said, and engage well, learn to engage well.
Right. I mean, you can get into kind of, I mean, there's a lot of New Testament principles of knowing the times in which we live, right? Paul being aware of different philosophers and just the culture of his day to be able to engage. I'm looking at it as a parent as well at this moment, right? My kids are 9 and 10, and so I mean, they don't have a phone yet. They don't have these type of things, but I want to be at least right there to where if they do listen to it or watch it, or if their friends are bringing this up, I'm not like caught off guard. I kind of want to keep my ear to the to whatever's out there. And so, just as a pastor, I want to make sure I know my sheep, and I want to know what they're getting themselves into, or else, I'm just playing defense all the time.
Hmm. One of the things I did for one of the things that my wife and I did for our kids is we wanted them to see screens as tools. That's kind of the
Yeah.
first sort of formational thing that we wanted to do around screens. So any app that we downloaded or anything like that, rather than it being just watch this video, we tried to download like the preschool games that like kids are manipulating things and shapes on screens. So it was this idea that like you're creating something, you're making something. As I got a little older, we downloaded like the drawing apps and we gave them the Apple Pencils and stuff so that they can draw and those kinds of things. And obviously, as they got older, it slowly slides into consumption. I think it's very difficult to prevent kids from doing that. But by primarily setting things up as these are tools, these are meant for content creation, I realized that my kids have a different relationship, I think, with their tablets than a lot of other kids do. So that's one. But the second thing is they were tablet first, not computer, right? And so just the medium of like holding something and knowing that like so I think it's different from when we grew up and there was like a computer, right? And you had a keyboard and there was this thing that you had to like figure out. It's a lot easier to enter into the consumption mindset when it comes to screens. And so I think again, being mindful of those things is super important. But I remember being so fascinated by when my kids first started asking, like, could I get a computer? And I was like, why? Like, what do you want a computer for? And for them, is I just want a bigger screen. That's kind of the way that they looked at it. And when I was like, look, this is what dad does on the computer. Like I showed them work and all this stuff. They're like, that's too complicated. And then I showed them that like this is what you use to make work. And I was showing them all the more things that you could do on the screen. And I think they were really fascinated by that. And so I think that's one of the things that we can do. Is like our life as adults is always on the computer. How often are we taking our young kids and showing them the things that we're doing on the computers? Just again, teaching them this idea that this is meant to be a tool. And again, in the age of AI, where this whole conversation is just going to be twisted a thousand ways between now and the next 10 years, I think, again, teaching people that we're not meant to be slaves to the screen, the screen's meant to serve us, I think is one way to help just sort of take the idolatry away from this object. And it's hard. It's very, very hard to do.
And I wonder, Kevin, if our role right now as ministers and parents and disciplers is to train students how to think through that, right? I
Mm,
think I think it's one thing to walk them through it, but also during this youth phase of their life, how do we process information? How do we not just immediately go from assumptions or consuming the information, but how do you train those muscles to think? Looking back in youth ministry, I'm going, man, I wish I spent more time training the students how to think versus just giving them the actual answer,
yeah.
or
Yeah.
the theology, even as good as that is, but to teach them how to even find out these type of things. Clark, I want to circle back real quick. You talked about the news. And I think this was interesting because it reminds me of this kind of debate we're having of physical book versus printed book versus articles you find online. And the further you get from kind of the source, I think that's actually somewhere hidden in this conversation because, what's the difference between a published book versus an influencer online? You don't have to go through all the steps of editing, fact checking, copyright, ISBN. There's more at stake to get your ideas to the mass public versus everyone is a influencer. Everyone gets to speak into your life. If we don't recognize that, I feel like that's a very, very dangerous thing that we're gonna miss.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think what you guys both said about doing it together with students, I mean, that's easy for us who are parents, you know. Something I've been realizing is it's easy to see screen time both as a parent and for your kids as like a babysitter. Like
Mm.
when I just need a moment to like our family's packing right now. When I need to pack, I throw my kids in front of the TV and turn a
Yeah.
movie on.
Yeah, for sure.
When I need a break, I pull out my phone and just start scrolling or do it, checking email or doing whatever. Um, but something that I've learned and had to learn and avoid that is that when I can engage together with my kids, even if it's over like K-pop Demon Hunter, which they love and they want to watch it for the millionth time, if I can be
Let them.
present with them in it, um, that's what's actually produced the best conversations because then I'm attuned to what they're consuming and I can kind of ask them what they're thinking about it and even steer the conversation in a way. Um, so I think that's something, it gets harder, right? As the kids get older because they want more autonomy, they have more independence, so they have more independence on screens as well. But I think that's one way when we talk with our parents in our youth ministry, because we're dealing with the whole family, giving the parents principles of healthy engagement rather than everyone just going to their respective corners in the home on
Yeah.
their own screens, which is just so common now.
Clark, I think a question that someone would ask as you were saying this is, as you're engaging with your kids or even as with your youth, are you doing that in real time? And how frequently are you pausing the movie of K-pop Demon Hunters and just be like, all right, let's talk about this? Or do you just kind of watch it
That's
all
good.
and then take notes and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, we're gonna have a debrief with Pastor Clark, right? Like, how do you do it? What's the practical?
That's good. I know I was talking with a parent in our church that said they literally like pause the movie while they're watching with their kids.
I
Oh,
ain't
that's
watching
what
it
I do.
with I ain't watching it with
That's
you
what
Yeah.
guys,
Kevin does
man.
too.
I constantly interrupting.
It's like a
Yeah.
nine
Just
hour movie.
constantly interrupt. Yeah, exactly.
And
Oh
and
no.
the kids are just like, "Oh, it's so annoying. Like dad won't stop pausing." This was really actually Kevin's kids telling me this.
Oh gosh.
Right? Right?
Um, For me, I don't have that kind of patience. Like my kids will actually ask me questions about things during the movie. I'm like, shh, just watch. Okay, we'll talk about it after.
It's reverse. They're like,
Yeah, it's
Dad,
reverse.
did you know that? And he's Clark's like, I want to watch the movie.
Um, but what I've found is for me, I usually like it's not actually immediate after for me and my kids. Maybe it's just how they are and the way they process or how I process. But usually it's like the next morning at the breakfast table, or it's in the car ride to
Mm.
school the next
Yep.
day, or at the
Yep.
dinner table the next night. They'll kind of think about as they're thinking about it more, they'll ask the question, or I'll ask the question like, so did you like that movie? Like, what did you think about do you remember like what did you think about this, Rumi and her whole like shame around that? And so that's what I found because to me, then I'm able to see these are the moments that stick with my kids in their minds and hearts. So I don't have to tackle everything. I'm
Yeah.
just trying to get at the main things they're attaching to.
Yeah.
But Kevin has a different
Yeah, I
method,
think,
so
yeah, no, just constantly pausing and asking the kids, like, what do you think that means? Because, yeah, well, yeah. Yeah, I'm just a serial interrupter. Do you remember music videos a long time ago? They had the behind the music videos and they would put up those pop-ups and there were people that
yeah.
hated those because they interrupted the flow. I loved all that and I would pause and I would read. But I did
Do
the
you
same
do
with
you
the kids.
do
Yeah.
you think our
I
audience
will
is
say
old
with youth
enough?
group though,
You think
to
they're old
remember
enough to
that.
understand like VH1 and MTV? I'm like, come on, man,
VH1,
that's
baby.
a long time ago, dude.
Uh,
Um, when we did youth ministry, like movie nights or whatever, I did not pause and interrupt. But I would have questions prepared right after, just so that we can make
mm,
sure that people were thinking about
yeah.
things right away. And in terms of media training, I always tell like so there are. It's intimidating, I think, if you didn't grow up really questioning the things that you were watching.
Mm,
And so just even starting with the simple question of like, what do you think this movie is trying to teach us? Or do you think there's any lesson in this movie that we should learn? Those are pretty broad questions and things that I think kids can answer pretty easily. But if you kind of start there, I always find that conversation tends to kind of jump off from there.
Mm,
And that's a good starting point. It's not really not that intimidating. Other than I think the typical questions of like, what was your favorite part or was it fun? Those are great questions too, but I think really asking the kids to think about like, did you learn anything? Like, were there any lessons to be
mhm,
learned from this movie or any lessons to be learned from any of the actions of the characters? I think that's a good way to get
mm,
into the conversation about the
mhm,
movie in a simple way. Yeah.
yeah. I think
yeah.
to add on to that for those who are youth ministers and youth leaders, I think to be very vigilant as you're watching, but then to kind of weave a lot of those things into your lessons, if it's top of mind, I think
Mm,
it's easier to flow into. And I think what that does in terms of discipleship is to know that this we are thinking about all of life, not just only
Mhm.
the
mm,
churchy stuff on Sundays. It's
Yeah.
everything. There's a spiritual element and there's a lesson theologically underneath everything. And so I think the hard work for us then as parents and or youth ministers and youth workers is to be super aware, but also we have to kind of in the background, we have to do a lot of study, pre-study, so that we're able to kind of take two and two
Mhm.
together and put them as a discipleship platform.
Mhm.
mm,
Yeah, and so I think, a lot of people talk about that with like you said, Kevin, media training. Now, when it comes to like social media and influencers, it's sometimes a little bit easier to do that when it's like this is a story, they're not real, it's animated, or even it's on screen, live action, it's fabricated. But with influencers, you have a real life person who's embodied in real life that I think we've seen a lot of our teens are really drawn to now.
Hmm.
It's interesting, the old young life adage that everyone would say when I would start youth ministry. They'd always tell me this, like, most important thing, doesn't matter how much you know, your kids won't care until they know how much you care.
Right.
And I always saw that as a little bit of like, oh, okay, yeah, so I need to be relationally engaged, but I always questioned whether that was fully true. Well, I think today that's kind of just smashed and out the window.
Yeah.
Like influencers don't know and don't care about our kids at all, and yet they care deeply about what influencers say and think and believe.
Yeah.
Um, so how do we navigate that, both as we're trying to minister now and competing with, oftentimes it feels like we're competing with influencers, but also as we're helping students, like you guys have been talking about, discern what they're consuming and discerning those messages that they're seeing on social media and YouTube and so on and so forth.
Uh,
one,
Go ahead.
go ahead. Well, okay. One thing I will say is I actually think that kids believe in some shape or form that influencers care about them. I
Mm,
actually think that that's one of the craziest things about social media is this person that doesn't know who I am.
hmm
I still believe that in some way, shape, or form, they care about me because of the content that they're producing. And I realized this shift a couple years ago when it was during the pandemic, like TikTok was blowing up like crazy.
hmm
And yes, there were dance TikTok videos and all that kind of stuff. And sure, vaguely interesting, right? But I realized that so much of the TikTok content was just like a slice of life stuff. It's just somebody carrying
mm,
around their phone while they're going grocery shopping. And it's not even, if it's like, oh, these are the best products, but it wasn't even that. It was just like, this is what I did today. And then the last shot of the video is them like turning off the lights and going to bed. And obviously those are produced, but I just kept thinking like, why did these videos have like 300 million views? It's like they're not doing anything extraordinary. And it's this idea that like this person's a friend of mine and I'm checking in to see kind of what they're doing. And I think that that's the kind of relationship a lot of these influencers have.
mm,
And I think that's an interesting phenomenon because essentially what they're doing is they're trying to show you like this is who I am and you can trust me. So what happens is you watch 50, 60, 70 of these videos and you're like, "Oh, this is a normal person. This person lives just like me." And then when they do have a video where they're looking at the camera and they're like, "Hey, I need to tell you guys something really important." And then they have that message where they're telling
Right.
you about
Mhm.
something they believe in. I think those are the things that we should tell the students. Hey, when they're saying those things, you have to filter that not through, I just like this person. I think this person's cool. But are they telling us the
hmm
truth or not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there truth in there that's worth believing in?
Mhm.
Is there truth in there that's beautiful and good and true? Or is this something that I need to be careful of? And am I being influenced by these ideas?
Yeah.
Um, and again, we have to just constantly be pointing our kids back to the truth of Scripture and saying God's word is true. This is the basis by which we judge all other truths. So I think that's super important.
hmm
Well, I think the reason why, and I could get Kevin, I think you're dead on, but I think the reason why we gravitate towards that, especially the millennials, Gen Zs, Gen Alphas, because we are looking towards authenticity, right? And
Right.
social media is the best and the worst
hmm
platform for that because everyone is authentic, or so it seems,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And I think what happens there again, how do we discern? I always go like, hey, they don't necessarily care about you, right? I mean, they this is who they are, and so I think it also allows us to kind of reframe the picture of authority and submission. And I
hmm
think when you look at it, who really is the one looking out for you? It should be your pastor, right? Or your shepherds, your discipleship leaders, because ultimately they're the ones with you all the time and they care and they're not going anywhere. But it's so easy because we're like, well, it takes time and efforts to go to be present, and I don't necessarily want that. So I'd rather have someone else on a
Mm,
screen tell me, because if I disagree, I could turn it off, I could
mhm,
unfollow, I can cancel. But
Mm,
then
mhm,
I think the way the Lord has formed and shaped us is within embodied community. And I think there's something about it where, hey, we are shepherds and we're trying to show you, hey, we love you. We want the best for you. We realize this is going to take years, if not decades, of building out relationships. And so, do you trust the character and the competency of these shepherds as they are drawing you here? And then, why is it so easy for us to just give all of our attention and affection to people that we just don't know? And maybe it's just because it's easier, and everyone
mhm,
else is following that person. And I wonder if that's why a lot of the New Testament is just warnings of false prophets and false
mhm,
leaders that come through different gates.
mhm. I wonder if that's even maybe we can attach there. That's another reason why we need to maintain some semblance of diversity in the body of Christ.
Yeah.
Because social media has become this, you know, ongoing echo chamber. People can continually through their algorithms just dive deeper into one view. And like you said, they can turn it off when they disagree. But I think it also, something I've noticed through, especially the last month on social media, I think it just kills discernment because people are now just consuming in a funnel. They're just drinking through a straw down one funnel. And they must think, well, that's everything that must be true. So that's all I'm going to consume. Um, but when we have a diversity in the body, it both speaks to the power of the gospel, but I think it's part of our formation and discernment because it forces us to be together with those that are not like us, that share different opinions on things. But if we can have healthy dialogue, we get to expose our students to a variety of different views and then begin that discernment process, even within the church, not just from at arm's length. Something that my youth director and I have just been talking about after all this political turmoil on social media is that we realized we have not really had like conversations or dialogues or discussions with our youth group about current events, about political things, but even just about social media in general, in a very focused way. We've done a lot of, we teach the Bible well, we apply it to different things, but we were just kind of talking about it. Like we still want to stay, the main message is the main message with the gospel and scripture. But if this is the cultural waters our kids are
Yeah.
swimming in now, um, Paul, like you said, Paul, you mentioned Paul in Athens knew the local culture enough to speak into it directly. I wonder if we're missing an opportunity when all we say is just preach the gospel, just teach the Bible, and we don't give that attention for discipleship information, and even just kind of show what does healthy dialogue look like to set up principles of discernment, because it just seems discernment is gone in the public square right now, both outside the church, but even maybe especially or even more so in the church.
Well, yeah, so much of it is about emotion, right? Like
Hmm.
the what I believe in has is tied to how I feel
Right.
emotionally. And
Yeah.
I think that's one of the tools that we have is we're recognizing that all stories are utilizing our emotions to sway us one way or another. And so that's why
Yeah.
we have to have a standard of truth.
Hmm.
So yeah, I agree with you that like youth groups mainly should be spending time studying the Bible.
Yes.
Um, but but we got to pull in from the cultural soup that they're swimming in all the time,
Hmm. Hmm.
constantly.
Hmm.
I think your point that you made earlier about social media being this funnel is really important. That's one thing that we can definitely teach kids, just knocking it over their heads again and again and again, that you are being fed an algorithm. This is your niche, your corner of social media.
Hmm.
What you are seeing in your social feed is not representing what everyone else is seeing. It
Hmm.
is curated specifically for you. And so when you're seeing the same things over and over and over and over again, that actually should be a red flag. For
Hmm.
example, like you like one K-pop Demon Hunter post, and then for the next 3 months, it's nothing but K-pop Demon Hunters,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
And so you could get into this thing of like, oh, everybody's talking about this, and then I'll ask people,
Yeah.
have you seen it? And they're like, no, and it's like, oh, okay. It's just my little corner because I liked one post one day, and it's like this for 3 months now. You know what I mean? But I think that also speaks to the danger, which is why with kids we have to talk about digital Sabbath. You have
Mm,
to disconnect from your like
hmm.
just wholesale, just stop. I think retreats are a great opportunity for youth pastors to take advantage of the idea that you're like
Yeah.
away, take the phones away, take the devices
Yeah.
away. They need to have these Sabbaths. It's a reset for the algorithms. It does so
Mm,
many good things to just completely reset that. One of the most dangerous things, and the time period where I was most concerned for students was you mentioned the Charlie Kirk shooting, the assassination, and like if you saw that, if you were within the first 8 hours of that happening, you probably saw the videos of him actually
mhm.
getting shot.
Yeah.
And for most kids, that was probably the first time they've ever seen anything like that, right?
Yeah.
And it's just crazy traumatic to imagine that. But the idea is the social feeds at that moment, because it is swarm based, the moment you
Hmm.
are engaging with one video like that, you're just going to be shown the 15, 16, 35
Yeah.
different angles again and again and again. And the social media companies, they couldn't catch up to try to catch all those videos to take them all down.
Hmm.
And so for those first 8 hours, that was like all that you saw. And I can only
Hmm.
imagine the trauma that comes from that. And then the next day, it's like cat videos and puppy videos, and you're just like,
Yeah.
that's not reality, right? You're not even
Yeah.
allowed to sit in that for a while because again, these social media companies do not care about anything with regards to your mental health. They claim they do, but the algorithm proves that they don't.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And so I think that's why we have to be really vigilant. That's why parents need to be in conversations with this stuff with their kids, youth pastors as well. We just have to be
Hmm.
really on top of this.
And can we be honest? Like this is just a new day and age in ministry, just in the culture,
Mm.
right? And I think
Hmm.
it is. I think youth ministry nowadays is going to be harder than ever because of this, because we are dealing with multiple topics and degrees of issues than we've never had to do it before. And so I think while the stakes are getting higher, I think we need each other more than ever. And so find good resources to kind of work together,
Hmm.
have people that you can process with. And I think you're
Hmm.
just going to process a little bit further along than where the students are at. I think you're going to
Yeah.
receive the information almost in real time.
Hmm.
But to disciple that, that's a whole nother venue of discipleship that we're just now learning. I all of us, and it's going to be harder, I think. But I think the
Hmm.
stakes are a lot more intense now.
Hmm.
So a question
Do
for,
you?
oh, go ahead, Kevin.
Well, I was going to say, do you guys think then that given all of the changes that are taking place discipleship wise, and this gets to I think what the topic of the webinar is about, how do
Hmm.
youth ministries then disciple over social media? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah.
Like just speaking from a tech perspective, I really think youth ministers and youth pastors. So technically, I'm not a youth pastor anymore, right? But if I had to go back into youth ministry, not had to, if I were allowed to, if I were
The
privileged
the
enough to, if I
joy,
were
the
honored
joy.
to,
Yeah.
yeah, if I were honored to, yeah, I would make sure that whatever social media platform we were utilizing, be it TikTok or Instagram, wherever my particular students are, I would make sure that I'm actually putting in the content because
Mm.
I need to affect their algorithm. And I would make
Yeah.
sure that I would tell parents, hey, parents, if your kids are on Instagram or on TikTok or whatever, make sure they're following our channel. And what I
Hmm.
would do is I would also make sure that our students are featured on the channel as well. And I would try to
Hmm.
make sure that we are giving space for the students to talk about and share things that they're learning. Student testimonies, and they don't have to be long. It could just be like, "Oh, I
Hmm.
loved youth group today," like even just those kinds of things, and putting that out there, because for me, that helps on the algorithm side of things get our gospel content to students, even if it's just, hey, remember this person,
Hmm.
remember this volunteer, remember this parent, and not just about announcements, but really putting gospel content out there.
Mm.
If you are doing sermons or Bible studies as a part of your youth ministry outreach, making sure that you are recording those, clipping those things out. It sucks that it's a part of the job, but I really think that it's a part of the job now,
Yeah.
just because that's where students are, right?
Yeah.
Like 30 years ago, it was if they're out playing football, then you should go to the football game and you should cheer them on. I think now it's like this is where they are. And I think we
Hmm.
need to have a presence there, if nothing but just to like jack up their algorithm a little bit occasionally. And then to make sure that our content is also varied, right? Like some of
Hmm.
the content should be about things that are happening in current current news. And you can wrap that up in prayers. Just have your students pray on social
Hmm.
media and
Hmm.
share those videos with you, and just have that be something that's out there. And I think one of the ways that we can digitally disciple our students is just by making sure that algorithmically we're showing up in their feeds
Hmm.
constantly. And again, that disrupts their understanding of who's trying to reach them, who's trying to speak with them, and the kinds of messages that they're trying to hear. So
Hmm.
we want to influence their algorithm by putting out content that if they are paying attention for 5 seconds and the algorithm switches, then yeah, maybe they'll get fed other things too that are good for them in terms of a
Hmm.
spiritual digital diet. Yeah.
I wonder if we can go more though, Kevin. Right? I agree with you because I think they need to see it as not just something to go and just get that little one clip. I think
Hmm.
that little content should lead to something more, maybe
Mm.
another resource, but it should never
Yeah.
just terminate on itself.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then I
Yeah.
was
Sure.
wondering,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
if we
Yeah. Yeah.
start ask? I know a lot of them maybe are camera shy or whatever, but it's always
Sure.
easier to repost, and I think that's a good step. But again, it's
Mm.
this create. Like, can we train them to create their own things and to show
Mm.
that you can do it as well, and you don't have to rely on me just to provide the spiritual contents. So maybe
Yeah.
it's as you're doing Bible studies, it's okay. Hey, we're going through the text. These are the things that you kind of pull out from it, and now you put it on your social feed, or why don't you put the youth group event on your social feed, so that now
Mm.
you become the conduit for everyone else that you influence to go
Hmm.
backwards. So it's not just, oh, it's just our youth group or the pastor
Sure.
or these type of things. It's teaching them how to create in their own spaces, and then they become the ministers of reconciliation in their spheres of influence.
Mm.
Hmm.
So a
Yeah. I've
question
been.
was, sorry.
Let me answer
Oh,
that,
yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Danny. Yeah, I think that question is actually something my youth director and I have been talking about. Should we engage more in social media from a creation standpoint or creator standpoint? And I don't think we'll ever be influencers because it takes just too much time.
Well, get
But
off MailChimp, dude.
I'm stuck. I'm stuck. Um, but for me, as someone that's been very resistant or hesitant towards diving into social media, I mean, I'm a long time lurker. Very rarely am I a creator. Um, but we're going through this book together called Youth Ministry as Mission by a couple of youth ministry and missiology professors at Asbury. And one of the things that they say is the youth pastor needs to think about what does it look like to be embodied in the world of the youth they're serving. I think it's really easy to view them as the same culturally as us because they're the same language, same nation, same culture, so on and so forth. So we don't need to. One of the things that they make a case for in that book is that each generation has their own embodied culture that the older generation is often resistant to because they don't feel like they need to engage with it. And they argue that to lovingly engage like Christ in the world of his disciples, we need to actually thoughtfully think about what is their worlds
Yeah,
and not just reject it. And
right.
so that led to a conversation to us of should we be doing some more of that? And it's got me thinking too that I think in the past, right, the church usually saw its extension of the pulpit ministry in obviously you have community groups, small groups, but there was usually some sort of bulletin, newsletter,
Hmm.
weekly email or devotional, and that was the way that they continued on the ministry from the pulpit and just putting content out there. And there's a lot of ministries in the church history in the past that did that. There are whole churches that had entire like my church in the 50s used to have their own like small little journal article that they would
Hmm.
publish weekly. Um, and I kind of feel like social media has now become that new extension, or digital content is the new extension of the bulletin, the newsletter, the devotional. And so I think while it's easy to just reject it and say, oh, we don't want to get in that world. But if we can kind of think about it as, well, we're just following the footsteps actually that of our forefathers. We're just doing it in a different form and putting out extensions of our ministry or content or pulpit. Then I do think you see a viable reason for that in social media. And
That's good.
yeah, and like you said, I think too what you guys are saying, it can't stop there. So one of the things I've also been thinking about, I don't know if you guys saw Ronnie Chang's bit that he did in Hawaii, his stand up, and like, he's very politically motivated, but he has this one hilarious bit where he says like, people watch one TikTok video and they think they're an expert on the topic, but there's a book behind the hashtag. You got to keep reading. And so that's something that I've been thinking about. Like, how can I push people towards the source?
Yep.
How can I recommend a book that this is coming on that, hey, if you're interested, don't just go watch like a 2-minute Instagram reel. Go read a couple chapters in this book that are really going to form a backbone for you in discerning more about this topic.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
good.
So you guys have probably all have answered the question of, there's a question of should we allow kids to have social media with guidance, or is it recommended for them to hold on? And I think, Clark, just he was the last person to talk. Kind of, we know it's a reality of life now in the lives of these students. So giving them guidance, using it in ways that we can engage them in youth ministry versus kind of, secluding ourselves from it is kind of what where you guys are kind of, recommending for our listeners that, someone like me who's old, I don't know, as well how to engage it, but, it's not about completely disengaging yourselves, but finding ways to redeem it and use it well.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and in the same way, there's a question about parents. How do we encourage them to help their kids? And especially, and then on the opposite of that, parents who are like so addicted to their phones, how do we
Mhm.
help them to like talk to them and be like, hey, don't be so,
Don't be
be
so
a good
addicted.
example to your kids. How do we help them
I
have
Yeah.
mean,
conversations?
that's gonna be, I feel like that's a harder topic. And also the grandparents in the congregations, man. I'm like, you know, I feel like that's gonna be have I think that's with working with the other pastors of the church, and it's gotta be from top down, just everybody thinking through. And I think what Kevin said, this digital Sabbath, I feel like that's gonna be one of the ways that's gonna change the culture in the church, because we're gonna be so connected that, I mean, it makes sense that God implemented Sabbath rest as a rhythm, not just as a one-time shot.
Mhm.
Um, for the parents, I think that's part of what we're having to see right now. It's your discipling even through your actions. And I think in these moments, it's going to be more and more clear, like that fruit of self-control. I think there's part of
Mhm.
that. It's engagement when you're with your student versus to kind of, I think Clark, you said just to kind of veg out or, hey, I had a
Mhm.
really long day. When is my turn? Right. I think
Mhm.
it's also that picking up that cross at that moment to engage versus to disconnect. And so those are going to
Mhm.
be not just for students. I think it's going to be harder for parents.
Mhm.
Um,
Would you
Yeah.
because
suggest
we're
talking
dealing
to
with it.
them? Hey, get off your phone, you idiot. It's just, I mean, parent.
And I don't know. I
That sounds like a great youth group video to put out. Just
yeah.
like so when parents that also follow the youth
But
ministry are like
they're on
scrolling
their device
and
as
then
they're
yeah, yeah, yeah.
reading it
So
though.
they're scrolling and then like the youth pastor pops up like, get off your device, you moron,
Put
spend
that
time
phone
on the school.
down.
Yeah, but then all you do is just keep scrolling until
I don't like this youth pastor and keep
Uh,
scrolling.
I don't.
Um,
It's hard. This got to be a whole church discipleship thing. It's not just a
yeah,
youth
it's
thing.
not a youth issue. I
No.
think I wish more people understood that it's not just youth kids that are addicted to social media. If you pay attention to the studies, it's like people in their 50s and 60s spend more time on
mhm.
their phones than actually people in their 20s.
Yeah.
And people in their 20s are creating more content. People in their
Mhm.
50s and 60s are consuming content.
Mhm.
It definitely, that's what the numbers bear out. So I think it's
Mhm.
a whole church thing. I do think senior pastors need to speak to this. I think that it is something that, but one thing I will say about this, one of the most effective things is when parents are on their phones, and usually it's the younger kids that'll do this, like the 5-year-old or the 7-year-old that would
Mhm.
be like, Mom, Dad, you're like on your phone too much. Don't get
Mhm.
defensive. Like
Mm,
apologize immediately. Like teach your kids, you're right. I was wrong to disconnect from
Mhm.
whatever it is that we're doing. And again, it's totally probably justified. Like most of the time, it's probably some email that you had to do or some text message you had to respond to, and kids aren't going to understand that. But I think having that posture of like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I shouldn't have done this versus getting defensive.
right.
That's absolutely one of the best ways to kind of gospelize the whole entire situation is give yourself or give the family the opportunity to see to see you be humble, to see you apologize, to see you say sorry. And again, the tables will be flipped. There will be a time where your
Hmm.
kids are on and you're going to have to, and you want them to have that posture too, like, oh, you know what, mom, dad, I'm sorry, and turn off the phone.
That's right.
Yeah, I think having rules in the house around phone use is going to be critical and helpful.
Yeah.
And again, parents, we have to subscribe to those rules as well. And if we have to break it, because again, maybe there is some email that we have to write or whatever, just explaining to everybody, hey, I have to write an email, like giving
Hmm.
everyone the opportunity to say, okay, you have permission to do that.
Yeah.
And the same goes for
Hmm.
students. I mean, I have to turn on assignment real quick. I could grab my phone. It's like, yeah, go ahead, go do it.
Yeah.
But setting those boundaries inside the family life is going to be helpful. And I think, again, if that's from top down, if like the senior pastors are talking about it, then you will get the grandparents, you will get the parents, you will get
Mhm.
the whole entire church. And I think that's critical because it isn't just a youth issue. It really is a whole church discipleship issue.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But can we
Yeah.
address when you're thinking about parents, also remind yourself like the role of the parents, the youth pastors, the leaders. We're trying to move our students from dependence to independence, right?
Mhm.
So that when they are kind of on their own, they're not just like wildly trying to figure this out on their own. I mean, we're trying to give them the steps, gradual steps. And so when we're talking about social media, it's the same thing, right? It's discernment, it's understanding. You don't just give it
Hmm.
to them at the very beginning. You're teaching them, you're discipling them through this process so that one day they are able to navigate those waters on their own, right? You're not going to always be there
Hmm.
to oversee that, but you're trying to give them gospel principles, but it's going to take time, and it's strategic. I think you have to start thinking when they're in elementary school, and then how do we think through this as they finish out high school, in I would say college even, you know?
Mhm.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think one of the, thing about addressing it as a youth pastor, let's say you're a youth pastor, you don't have kids, or like me, your kids are young. It often feels a little bit like, oh, well, what do I know? Like I can't speak into the lives of the parents, or they'll even think like, well, what do you know? You don't have teenagers, you don't know what it's like. But I think this is where the role of the youth pastor does have some advantage because something I've noticed over my 16 years of student ministry is we have insight into a wider spread of family life and rhythms, and
Mhm.
we can use that to our advantage. And I think we all can kind of sense that, and we've all kind of seen this, that the kids that are not inundated with their phones are typically the kids that have the most present parents. Because if their parents are present with them, they don't feel as much the need to be drawn away to their phones. And that's not 100%, it's not a guarantee. We can't guarantee that. But by and large, what I've seen in youth ministry, the kids that have parents that are really engaged and involved in their lives, not just carting them around, dropping them off, and then giving them their own time, those are the kids that tend to be less addicted. And I think we can bring up some of those models in a way that's not, elevating or shaming, but really trying to show examples. Like, hey, in youth ministry, this is what we typically see. I like to point to data a lot to my parents because, it's hard to refute data. I mean, you still can because of research methods and so on and so forth, but at least you have something solid you can attach itself onto. And then even just address that. Like, I know I don't have kids who are teens, but I have seen a lot of families come through the youth ministry. I've seen a lot of different rhythms of family life, and this is generally what we've seen as we've engaged with the like hundreds, if not thousands, of kids that we've worked with in our careers as youth pastors.
Yeah. One last question. We only have a few minutes, but it's a really quick question. But are there any resources you've helped you found that have been helpful on this topic? Books, podcasts, articles, websites that any of you guys can recommend instead of just watching our webinar like Ronnie Chen said, but we can learn more about it. Books, podcasts, articles,
Hmm.
websites.
This is an older one, but Tony Reinke's book, 12 Ways Your Phone is Changing You.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, that one I think really nails the idea that like the medium is the message, the way you're holding the device, the way you're interacting with it,
Hmm.
it is affecting the way that we're doing things. And this is why I'm saying it's affecting ministry as well.
Hmm.
And so I
Hmm.
think understanding those principles is helpful for talking to parents on a much higher level. than just like, oh, pointing out specific things like, oh, don't do this or don't do that, but really
Hmm.
thinking about it from a theological perspective. I think that book does a really, really good job of laying down the foundation for how we
Hmm.
ought to think about how the various mediums that are out there are affecting us, transforming us, and the ways in which we need to. Because we were talking earlier about discernment, and I think that's a great book for discernment. And there's a student version of that as well.
Mm,
Hmm.
yeah.
Think it's called the student edition. Yeah, I haven't looked at it in a while, but yeah,
Makes sense.
yeah.
If you haven't studied her already, Jean Twenge, I mean, I think that's kind of
Hmm.
Mm,
standard classwork stuff now. And so she wrote iGen, which kind of at the very beginning of the whole Gen
Hmm.
Z thing, she kind of like discerns a lot of the trends and topics. I'll give you an old one that we had to read kind of in our doctoral studies. It was published in 1985. It was called Amusing Ourselves to Death
Mm,
by
Hmm.
Neil
right.
Postman.
Postman.
Yeah,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
so it was a prophet of his time. It was in
Hmm.
85 and he was saying, "Hey, the new TV is going to kind of replace a lot of the family structures and
Hmm.
so goes a lot of the dialogue and the culture is going to go." So, if you want to kind of trace the history, Neil Postman's book is pretty insightful
Mm.
there.
yeah.
I mean, similar veins, my favorite book of all time, Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451, it was written in like the 50s or 60s. I can't remember, maybe even earlier than that. But yeah, he basically talks about the love for books and how that's going to get replaced by he describes the family home as having this giant wall screen, which sounds like a projector and LED screen now. But I'm thinking about like podcasts. This is not one that's pertaining to social media as much, but I think a good podcast that tries to uh, you know, thread through the middle or thread the needle of issues and try to help people discern how to think about current events, which I think is very relevant to the conversation with social media. It is the Good Faith podcast by Curtis Chang and David French. I love David French. I think he has a really good handle on current events and how to think about them, especially when it comes to political things. But they often bring on guests and just really try to ask the question, how do Christians think holistically, biblically, and balanced when it comes to any issues?
Okay. Great. Great. Well, thank you guys. We're nearly out of time, and I know Clark, you brought up the term. I've heard our teenagers, Gen Alpha, Gen Z, they're digital natives, but I am definitely a digital naivety, not native. So I really learned a lot from you guys, and again, how I can think about this as a youth pastor, a youth worker, and we're just going to continue to have to figure it out and find our way through it. And at Rooted, we really care about the church and parents discipling their teenagers to lifelong faith. So, we really appreciate our listeners today. And if you have any questions, please reach out to any of us. You can find our information on the Rooted webpage. And I'm going to close this in prayer. Lord, with this topic that's still evolving and emerging, Lord, having spiritual discipleship, digital discipleship with spiritual and navigating influencers and social media. Give us wisdom. Help us to be clear and loving with our students and parents. We thank you that we can continue to learn and grow and evolve more and more in this subject. We thank you for this time today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Man, awesome.
Amen.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we'll see you at our next webinar.